Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our follow-up session of Rebuild and Refocus. I'm Margie Douglas, the Program Manager for the Small Business Development Center at Southwest Virginia Community College, and joining us also from the Small Business Development Centers are Cindy Fields, the Director of the Virginia Highlands Community College, Sbdc, Mandy Archer, the Director of the Blue Ridge Crossroads, Sbdc, Tracy Nyer with the State Sbdc office, and Chris Van Orden, who is an Sbdc craft beverage consultant. In order to maximize our time, we have muted everyone. We will take questions at the end of the presentation. If you'd like to ask questions or provide feedback, please type that in the chat box feature. So this morning's agenda includes our Virginia Phase 1 updates from Stephen Turner with the Virginia Department of Health, ABC update with Chris Van Orden, Serve Safe tips during COVID-19 with Sandy Stoneman of Virginia Tech, industry financial tips and supply chain with Cindy Fields, Sbdc resources with Mandy Archer, and then we'll follow up with questions and answers. So at this time, if Stephen Turner is on the call, we will proceed and turn it over to Stephen.
Good morning. I believe I'm in as a panelist now. Sorry, I was having some problems a minute ago. Can everyone hear me just fine?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'll apologize in advance. A lot of the information that I'm going to review came out kind of late yesterday afternoon, so I've been trying to review prior to this webinar today, but I thought I would just kind of go over some of the Safer at Home Phase 1 requirements for the restaurant and beverage services. Effective May 15th at 12 a.m., there's going to be an allowance for outdoor dining, provided businesses can offer or implement these mandatory requirements. And just kind of going down the list of some of them is posting signage at the entrance that states that no one with fever or symptoms of COVID-19 or known exposure to COVID-19 case in the prior 14 days is permitted in the establishment. Some additional signage to provide public health reminders regarding physical distancing, gatherings, options for high-risk individuals, and staying home if sick. If on-site or on-premise dining is allowed, providing a minimal of 6 feet between parties at tables. If tables are not movable, seat parties at least 6 feet apart. Spacing must allow for physical distancing from areas outside the facility's controls, such as public sidewalks. Making sure that we do not seat parties of more than 10 patrons. Do not seat multiple parties at any one table unless marked with 6-foot divisions. Bar seats and congregation areas of restaurants must be closed to patrons except for through traffic. Keeping game areas, dance floors, and playgrounds closed. If live musicians are performing at an establishment, they must remain at least 6 feet from patrons and staff. Employees working in customer dining and service areas are required to wear face coverings over their nose and mouth. The executive order references CDC use of cloth face coverings guidance. Using single-use disposable menus, e.g. paper, and discard after each customer. Reusable menus are not permitted in Phase 1. Refilling food and beverage containers or implements brought in by customers are not allowed in Phase 1. Prior to each shift, employers should ask that the employee self-measure their temperature and assess symptoms. No self-service of food except beverages, including condiments. Condiments must be removed from the tables and dispensed by employees upon the request of the customer. perform thorough cleaning and disinfection of frequently contacted surfaces, including digital ordering devices, check presenters, self-service areas, tabletops, bathroom surfaces, and other common touch areas every 60 minutes during operation. Tabletops and credit card/bill folders must be disinfected between patrons. Table resets must be done by an employee who has washed their hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds just prior to the reset activities. And only 10 patrons may wait for takeout in the lobby area at one time. And of course, a restaurant or food facility can continue to operate with carry-out, curbside, or drive-through as well. And I was kind of chiming in. I don't know if anybody had any questions now or if we were waiting until the end.
We had planned to wait until the end.
Okay. And again, sorry, I just kind of went down the list of mandatory requirements. So those are kind of new to us, but we would also be kind of looking out for best practices. Facilities can encourage customers to wear face coverings while entering, exiting, or otherwise traveling throughout the restaurant. They may be removed while seated. Obviously, you can't eat with face coverings on. Recommend utilizing reservations for dining on premise. And again, this at the moment only includes outdoor dining. Using staff-facilitated seating where appropriate. If seating is not staff-facilitated and tables cannot be moved to meet the physical distancing requirements, tables that should not be used must be clearly marked. Table 10, something to discourage customers from sitting down. Using technology where possible to reduce person-to-person interaction, including mobile ordering, menu tablets, text on arrival for seating, and contactless payment options. Facility consider methods to make point-of-sale terminals safer, including the use of no-contact applications, placement of a glass or clear plastic barrier between the employee and customer, providing hand sanitizer station for customers and employees to use after handling credit, debit cards, terminals, or even handling of cash.
Okay, thank you.
Servers. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I'm right at my 10-minute. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, you're good. If you've got extra information, please share it.
Well, again, guys, sorry, with this information come out kind of late. I was just actually reviewing it about an hour before the meeting, unfortunately. So I'm just kind of going down the list. I will say, if anybody has any questions, Sandy's got my email, or I could send my email out. So obviously, if anybody has any questions about this, please don't hesitate to reach out to us locally. And I can provide links to all this that I'm just kind of reviewing at the moment.
Stephen, could you type your email address in the chat box for everyone?
Well, they, unfortunately, VDH, yeah, I'm on the phone. VDH is discouraging the use of Zoom until we get prior approval, and unfortunately, I didn't.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Okay, well, thank you very much. And are you going to be able to stay on the call for a while?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So then we'll save the questions until the end.
Okay.
Okay, and so next we have some ABC updates with Chris Van Orden from the Small Business Development Center.
Great. All right, I'm going to try and share my screen here. Hopefully this will show up very quickly. There we are. All right, so I'm going to be talking about updates to alcohol production and sales. This is mostly focusing on Virginia ABC issues, but I also briefly cover some TTB updates. So Virginia ABC has been updating regulations as far as the sale and production of alcohol since COVID-19 hit. They have a single page on their website that includes all of the updates, both for businesses and for consumers. I have it linked out there. It's very easy to find based on their homepage. It's on a banner right up at the top. Businesses that are looking for particular guidance for whatever their particular field is can scroll all the way down to the bottom. They have a regularly updated Q&A with specific guidance on each new measure. So the most recent one of those went out April 23rd. And I'm going to be covering some of the sort of larger issues that have been changed since I think mid-March. So I'm not trying to be comprehensive, but just giving some of the broad strokes on major updates that companies should be aware of. So I should also say, as I'm covering all of this, Virginia ABC is absolutely the authority when it comes to all of these regulatory updates. So anybody who makes, sells, or serves alcohol should be familiar with their ABC agent or know how to reach them. This link here will steer you to whichever office and agent is the correct one for you. So please do go to them if you have any questions on how these regulatory updates have been interpreted or whatever. Do not be shy, they like to hear from you. So with that said, I'm going to talk about some of the updates that are coming online. This is just something that recently happened. Virginia ABC is opening and making some changes to their stores. A lot of stores had been closed, particularly in the Northern Virginia region, but they are reopening a lot of those stores that had either been shuttered or consolidated. All employees are going to be required to wear masks, and they're instituting a new online ordering process for curbside pickup at the ABC stores. So people will be able to go online and order spirits and just roll up and pick them up in person. So that's just something that people should be aware of, particularly distilleries, spirit makers, things like that. But now I'm going to go into some of the regulatory updates that affect a wide range of businesses. So this, basically all of these updates, they have detailed guidance on that website, on that Q&A form, but I'm going to just do some top line details. So to-go sales being a big change in terms of the way that alcohol is treated in Virginia. The date at the beginning of each of these bullet points is the date that the regulatory update went into effect. They're generally in place as long as the governor's order, executive order 51 is still in place, but you can find the specific information on each of those. So first, mixed drinks can be delivered and picked up. This applies to both. Picked up by meaning somebody can take it to go directly from the establishment. So this applies to both restaurants with mixed beverage licenses and distilleries with approved tasting rooms. The restaurants are required to sell food with the mixed drinks when they're making those sales, whereas distilleries are not, but the number of mixed drinks that are permissible at distilleries are lower than at restaurants. And they define the types of packages that are allowable for selling these mixed drinks to go. So businesses that had been selling mixed drinks can sell them to go or for delivery, but they have to be aware what the parameters are of that, including the package types. The types of containers that wine and beer sold to go, that has been expanded recently. So now that includes things that are the PET plastic containers as well as swing top bottles. So it just opens up more avenues for people who are able to sell those to go already. They just have more options available to them. Curbside pickup of beer, wine, and spirits, and then delivery and beer and wine are now allowed. So that is applicable to both on and off premise license holders. There are lots of different permutations here. I'm not going to go into all the different ways that can pan out for an individual business, but the delivery, it's important to know that for certain types of businesses, there's no delivery permit required if they did not have one in place. They are now allowed to do that. If you believe that might apply to your business, be sure to look into it and reach out to your ABC agent to confirm before you take any of that on. Then DTC, direct-to-consumer shipping of spirits is now permitted. That's for distilleries with existing ABC distillery store agreements. So distilleries that have ABC stores located on their premises are now allowed to ship spirits directly to consumers. Maximum number of 6 bottles per customer can go get put in allowable services such as FedEx and UPS. And that includes both spirits and low alcohol coolers that have been blended on site. So businesses, distilleries that did not have that option before now do under the current regulations. So that's the sort of overall to-go sales adjustments that have been made. There are a few other large ones that are worth noting. Hand sanitizer production, that's most manufacturers of alcohol are generally aware of these updates, but distilleries have been able to do that since March 18th. Breweries were more recently permitted to do that. There's lots of guidance surrounding that, both at the state and federal level. I'll be speaking briefly about TTB and hand sanitizer production a little bit later. But if that's something that a company is interested in doing, there are ways to do that. Another thing of note that all Virginia ABC licensees that had annual fees that were due between March and June have an additional 90 days to post those fees to Virginia ABC. Again, you want to make sure that that encompasses whatever the payments that your individual business is paying. Reach out to ABC if you're unclear, but this is for all annual fees for permits and licenses. Those are going to be deferred by 90 days. And then finally, retailers are now permitted to return product to wholesalers under a broader range of circumstances. The refunds, if the product is refunded, it must be noted on an invoice. There are details on how that might pan out or how that would manifest itself for a business, but it's something that had not been permissible before. So those are the sort of larger Virginia ABC updates that have been instituted since the COVID-19 situation and the executive order at the state of Virginia. I do just want to note TTB has also made some regulatory updates, Alcohol, Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. So this is, they have a landing page as well that consolidates all of their regulatory adjustments. And again, they have information there on the proper production of hand sanitizer, deferred payment of particular fees, and returning and destroying product. So again, any company that is overseen by TTB should be familiar with that website and just aware of what updates have come down from them. Then I have just some information on Virginia Sbdc resources. I'm not going to dwell on this because we're going to be discussing this a little bit later on in today's webinar, but it is worth noting that there's a page dedicated in the Recovery Resource Center to Virginia ABC issues. Pretty much everything I discussed today is either detailed on there or linked out from that page. So if you have any questions or follow-up that you want to make sure is covered, you can always go there. And I know there's, there's specific guidance for food and alcohol related service in the governor's reopening guidelines as well. So all of this information is consolidated, and some of it will be discussed later when we talk about the Recovery Resource Center. And that's it from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Our next speaker is Sandy Stoneman with Virginia Tech, and she's going to talk about some serve-safe tips during COVID-19.
All right, I am going to see if I can get my screen to share and put this up for you. All right, so again, my name is Sandy Stoneman. I'm with Virginia Cooperative Extension. I'm actually a food safety extension agent for the Southwest District of Virginia. I decided today that I would base my presentation on the FDA's best practices for reopening retail food establishments. Instead of specifically targeting ServSafe. And the reason being is that the National Restaurant Association, who creates the ServSafe curriculum, both the food handler training and the certified food protection manager training, has done a great thing, and they are offering their online food handler course for free. And I'll give you more information about that at the end of this presentation. But I just thought, instead of me trying to go through that in a very brief time period, because normally that takes about 2 hours, I figured I would just go through this best practices information, and then that way employers can have their employees fully trained for free online through the ServSafe training. And I'll give you the links to that here in just a little bit. So some of the things that the FDA, before reopening, the FDA suggests that, you know, as far as operations go, and I think Steve Turner mentioned this, you know, post your signs that informs everybody, on not only your employees but your guests, on how to stop the spread of COVID-19. You want to check before you open. I mean, I know some establishments may have been closed, and then some may have been only open for to-go orders, but you wanted to go through and check all of your equipment, make sure everything's in good working order before you open. You want to make sure that everything is stocked, clean, ready to go, and check to make sure that you haven't had any problems with pests while maybe perhaps you've been closed or partially closed during this last several months. You want to check your, make sure you have good ventilation in your facility, you know, that all of that is working well. If at all possible, the FDA suggests trying to create additional circulation. So that might be making sure, if you have screens on your windows or doors, keeping those open, you know, so that you can get increased airflow through the operation. Excuse me. Also, you want to consider anything that normally would have been a high touch type situation, where maybe where condiments are left on tables. Excuse me, I think the allergies are getting me. That, you know, anything that might be used a lot, like salt shakers, pepper shakers, maybe consider going to individual servings, like, you know, issuing those condiments to your customers, you know, in a ramekin or little salt and pepper packets instead of reusing and anything. And then also, I think Stephen Turner said that in the new guidance, which I haven't seen, but if I may be wrong, but I think what he mentioned was that we're supposed to use disposable menus that are thrown away after each customer, instead of trying to wipe those down and clean them. You want to make sure that your water supply, because I know some places are on a municipal water supply, so that testing is done for you. But if you're on a well or your own potable water supply, make sure you know, if you've been closed, you want to make sure that you have that tested and you have good potable water in the facility. You want to make sure that you take time to clean your ice machine and ice bin if that's, you know, the facility's been closed and that hasn't been in use on a regular basis in the last couple of months. We do want to make sure that we're implementing some additional cleaning, disinfection, and sanitizing procedures when we're reopening. We want to make sure that we're using a sanitizer or a disinfectant that is going to be approved for use against COVID-19. There is a list in that's put out by the EPA. You can find that on their website that lists all of the approved sanitizers and disinfectants for COVID-19. But the CDC does say that, if you don't want to use one of these pre-approved sanitizers or disinfectants by the EPA, you can use 1/3 cup of bleach per gallon of water. Now, I do want to point out that we're talking here, this is for disinfection of non-food contact surfaces. You would never want to use one of these stronger disinfectants or even the 1/3 cup bleach per gallon of water on a food contact surface, because these can be, in that high concentration can be actually toxic. So this is truly for non-food contact surfaces. But you do want to make sure that you are cleaning and sanitizing your food contact surfaces correctly. So making sure you're doing the correct wash, rinse, and sanitize on those surfaces, and then doing it even on maybe a more frequent basis. You want to make sure that you're getting any common area, that's been used a lot. That might be the restroom. It might be, a waiting area, that you're cleaning and disinfecting those areas more frequently maybe than we did before this COVID-19 situation. Again, this is we had some guidance on this from VDH in that, those high touch areas, things like the credit card machines and checkout counters, that those really are supposed to be cleaned and disinfected between each customer. But think too about anything that your customers might be touching, so that you can have those cleaned and disinfected on a regular basis. I think every hour is definitely a good procedure to follow. If you may be switching to single-use plates, cups, silverware, that kind of thing. If it might just may be easier during this time period, but if you're going to do that, you want to make sure that you have a sufficient stock. You want to make sure too that your employees that they're handling any kind of reusable food service equipment with clean hands, and then gloves. And you want to make sure that employees make sure that they wash their hands and remove their gloves after directly handling any kind of used food service items, if you're going to use reusable. You want to make sure too that you take time to train your staff on the new procedures that you're going to make sure that they're following. Maybe create a new checklist that is, it's going to be different than what they maybe had used prior to this whole situation. So, create a checklist that they can follow to make sure that they understand, who, when, how, and making sure that they really do understand that they're going above and beyond the procedures that they used to do. You want to make sure that they understand exactly how often they need to be disinfecting these non-food contact surfaces, and making sure that you have the proper cleaners and disinfectants on hand, have a supply big enough to handle the demand that you're going to have when you get ready to reopen. We want to still make sure we're following some proper food safety protocols. We want to make sure that we have proper cold holding and hot holding equipment that's working correctly. We want to make sure that we have the thermometers available and that they're calibrated and accurate, so that we can check to make sure all of our equipment is working correctly and that our foods are being held at the proper temperatures. And you want to make sure too that any of your cold holding or hot holding equipment is protected from potential contamination. You want to make sure you're using the FIFO method, you know, making sure that you're rotating your product on the proper rotation method, you know, using your oldest product first and that it's not expired. But you want to also make sure that any food that has been left in the facility is checked to make sure you haven't had any problems with pests, that there's been no spoilage, and getting rid of anything that is expired. Make sure that you're still, you know, storing your product correctly to prevent cross-contamination, especially, you know, making sure you have a separate area for the additional chemicals that you may be needing to supply in the facility. For washing and sanitizing your equipment at your 3-compartment sink, you want to make sure that you've got the proper water temperature that you're going to need, that you've got your sanitizer test strips that you're going to need to check the concentration of your sanitizer that you're using on this food contact equipment. And then hand washing. This is one of the things that has changed as far as the requirements go. Normally, when we talk about teaching hand washing for food preparation, we said that the scrubbing step was 10 to 15 seconds for scrubbing your hands after applying soap and water to your hands. Now they're saying to effectively remove the COVID-19 virus, you really need to be scrubbing with that soap on your hands for at least 20 seconds in order to effectively remove the virus. So that's something that, I mean, a lot of people do not spend the proper time on hand washing, and that's something that we really need to emphasize to our employees, that they need to be following proper hand washing protocol, not only when to wash their hands, but re-emphasize how to wash their hands, and that now the scrubbing part of that hand washing is increased to 20 seconds. Of course, we want to always make sure it is easy for our staff to wash our hands. We need to make sure those hand washing sinks are always stocked, you know, with soap, paper towels, trash bins to throw away your paper towels, signage so that staff are fully aware of how to wash their hands. That you also want to make sure that they understand that they should only be washing those hands at the hand wash sink, not any other sink that would be used for food preparation. We don't want to take the risk of washing any of those germs down or get on a sink where we might be doing food preparation. This is something that was not necessarily, was not required previously. We did not have to provide hand sanitizer for our customers or our employees. Now what we're saying is that we really should be having hand sanitizer available to both employees and customers. It needs to be a minimum of 60% alcohol. So 60 to 90% alcohol is what they're saying. And employees need to realize that the hand sanitizer is not something that we put on in place of hand washing. You hand wash first, then apply the hand sanitizer. What happens in food service operations, a lot of times we're handling things that maybe have a lot of fats, oils, grease, you know, and those things get on your hands. And if you don't wash your hands first, and you apply hand sanitizer with that grime and buildup on your hands, the hand sanitizer actually binds with those fats, oils, and grease and dirt on your hands, and then doesn't have a chance to actually kill any of the bacteria or germs that are on your hands. So you want to make sure that you're cleaning your hands first, then applying the hand sanitizer. We want to have some kind of protocol to help check our employee health. I think Stephen mentioned that the VDH guidance said that really we should be doing this, you know, every shift, checking to make sure that, you know, our employees feel well, that they, and also that when they come into the facility that they haven't had any type of exposure. And, you know, you want to make sure that they are very well aware of your employee health policy and when they should come to work and when they shouldn't. You know, have a plan for higher than normal absenteeism of your employees, and then making sure that you can supply them, or they have a way to have the face coverings that they're going to need to have in place in order to work in the establishment. Social distancing, I think Stephen again addressed this in his guidance, in that we still need to make sure that we minimize the person-to-person contact that we have. We need at least a 6-foot distance between workers and customers. You know, we're not allowed to have the, you know, self-service or bar type areas open at this point in phase 1. And even think about the kitchens, break rooms, that kind of thing for your employees. You want to make sure that you can maintain that social distancing of 6 feet. And then I mentioned at the very beginning, as far as just basic food handler training, I think it's really important that we take this opportunity that we train our staff, and that's all staff, whether they're front of the house, back of the house, anybody. Anybody can take the free food handler course. Normally this is a, you know, $15 course per person. So this is a great benefit to all of our food establishments. Anybody can sign up and take this course for free. I've given you the website, you know, there at servesafe.com, where you can get on in this training. In addition to the food handler training, the National Restaurant Association ServeSafe has created 2 additional videos that are about like less than 10 minutes apiece on safe takeout procedures, and then also safe delivery procedures for the COVID-19 food service operations. The other thing I really want to encourage establishments to do is that once you have done this training and your staff has completed it, make sure you document it. Get a copy of the certificate, you know, or, you know, document any in-person training that you do, because as far as just it shows that your facility is taking and doing the due diligence that it needs to make sure that it can serve their customers safely. The other thing that I wanted to mention that I thought was a wonderful benefit is that ServeSafe is also offering free career development training. So like restaurant management type training, hospitality training. And these are really, really good courses that teach some good principles that are not necessarily always, that they do focus on food safety, but then also they're teaching a lot of other things as far as food service operations go. So it's a great opportunity for staff, if they're interested in pursuing and moving up in their careers in the food service industry, to take this training for free. So I would really encourage you, and it's the same location where it says servesafe.com, the free courses. And again, that's through May 31st. I think that is all that I have for now, but again, at the end of the discussions today, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sandy. That's great information. Up next is Sandy Fields, and she's going to be discussing industry tips, financial tips, and supply chains. Sandy?
Okay, let me ask, can everyone see my slides? Okay, So today I wanted to reshare some information that I shared on behalf of Performance Food Service last week when we opened the work sessions and webinars last Thursday. I'd also like to put in another plug that we are partnering with Virginia Community Capital and with several other organizations as well. But we will be having another series on Thursday at noon. And so we will be happy to share that information with you. But that is a great webinar series. And so last week we talked about reopening businesses with a focus really on food service, and decided that we really didn't have enough time to cover all this in depth. So we wanted to have another session that was just 100% dedicated to opening the food service industry. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the main issues that are affecting the food service industry right now. Right now, what we're seeing is that there's a truck driver shortage, and that has created logistic issues in back orders and slower delivery times. We know that there are protein shortages. The farms producing vegetables, that is in a better situation than it was, but in some situations, when there were employees that were diagnosed, it meant that there were large groups that had to be quarantined for 14 days because that individuals were working very close together. Also, the issue with food service industry is that, as everything shut down and their sales took a nosedive, they had to reduce their employees. So, they are short-staffed really still in every area. In the Southwest Virginia area, there were, with the one company, there were about 5 individuals that were sales reps, and now they are down to 2 individuals that are covering the same territory. So they are also short-staffed even in their distribution facilities. There has been a higher demand for packing supplies, obviously due to takeout. There is also going to be a reduction, we know, in seating capacity, and also, we foresee that there will be a reduction just in returning customers, just due to the fact that people are uncertain as to whether it is safe for them to be back out and eating. So obviously things, today are a little bit different. When we were preparing for this last week, we felt like that phase 1 for Virginia was going to allow restaurants to open back up, seating people inside. And of course, we know that is not the case during this phase 1. But the other question is, how long will the shortages last? I've heard some different things on this even through yesterday. But analysts are predicting that things will start to improve some in June. As far as Performance Food Groups has commented, they don't believe that things are going to be back in full swing and in a normal situation probably for quite some time. Long-term shortages will depend on improving bottlenecks at the processing and packaging plants, and that's of course what's caused a lot of issues with protein shortages. You should expect higher prices through the end of the year. So what should you expect in those food costs? We know that you're going to see inflated costs in protein, and that's really in all areas of protein, but particularly, we're seeing those prices going up on the beef side and pork side. Inflated costs in packaging supplies, seeing inflated costs with rice and beans or any kinds of foods that are being imported. So just to cover a little bit on the specifics of the shortages, Our family actually operated a food service business for over 30 years, so I have had a lot of experience in food service. And I think for small businesses, particularly as you're thinking about opening back up or expanding your service, understanding the supply and understanding pricing is so very important. But right now, what I have heard through Performance Food Group, and I think this is true all over, is that 90% of all boxed beef that you would purchase, which would be things like sirloin, ball tip, ribeye, top sirloin, any of your higher blends of ground beef, those are out of stock. And there seems to be not really a good back order date on that. For some of the lower grade beefs, they were seeing last week a back order date of the 17th, which would be next week. There are some issues with dairy. Obviously, we've all seen the stories about the dairy farmers that have had to pour out the milk. It does seem, though, that this is clearing up, that as the numbers with COVID-19 have fallen, that some of these processing plants are getting back to work, so that's a good thing. Right now with Food Service Performance Group, they are limiting all of their customers to 2 boxes of chicken per order. You know, if you are a business that sells a lot of chicken, you know that that is almost like having nothing. So they do hope that this is going to improve. Tyson is to be reopening. Pork, both raw and semi-processed, things like bacon and ham, right now that is just pretty much extinct. Produce, with the Performance Food Service Group, they do own some of their own farms and have some private label produce. So they feel like they're in good situation on this. Excuse me. As far as seafood goes, they indicated that they had a good supply of frozen seafood and that fresh seafood was starting to come back in this week. They do now have oysters. Again, rice and beans are limited due to the fact that most of those are imported. Paper products, they indicated they saw a drain on those about 4 weeks ago, but that those products are catching back up. They also said, you know, expect that substitutions are going to be out of stock as well. So as you think about some tips for survival and success, you know, you're probably going to want to rethink your traditional menu offerings. You need to understand what that supply chain looks like. It may mean, you know, that you're having a different special every day or every week, and that's going to depend on what type of product that you can get. Some of the suggestions that they made was that, you know, you may want to limit your menu because your kitchen can execute dishes faster, your customers can order more quickly, it's going to reduce dead stock, lower your waste, which will aid in your food costs and your profit control. It's going to be easier to train new hires. If you have those, you can increase your turnaround, your profits, and have higher profit margin items. Certainly cooking methods and dishes also would allow food to be prepared in advance. If you have a set menu and you decrease those menu offerings, that's going to increase your speed of service and hopefully reduce your labor costs as well. And I did include Paul Conley's contact number in these slides. He is with Performance Food Service. He did indicate that they had picked up quite a bit of business and that they were able to source some products that some of the other food service companies had decided that they weren't trying to resource at this point in time. The other thing I really wanted to talk to you about was the dollars and cents of restaurants. Now more than ever, it's going to be really important for you to consider your prices and what your food costs are. Your food costs normally should run between about 28 and 35% of costs, depending on you know, what type of restaurant that you actually have. But the other things that you want to think about are your portions too large? Now, I will say this, that, you know, you don't want to make a drastic difference in your food portion cost because, you know, customers equate your food portion sizes with quality, and so you don't want your reputation to suffer at this. But it's very important that you are measuring, and that you have, if it's a 3-ounce serving of a side item that you're supposed to be ordering, that you make sure that your servers are using a 3-ounce spoon. It's very important that if you're serving them ground beef or a hamburger, that you have all of those pattied out and weighed to make sure that they are all the same. It's amazing, really, to realize that when you patty ground beef and you look at a patty and you think, oh, those are the same, how different they really can be when you actually weigh those two and compare them. So are a lot of customers getting to-go bags? That's something else to think about, you know. So what kind of food cost and supply cost do you have tied up in that? You want to consider that, you know, is it best to use paper? Is it best to use plastic? There's all different types of plastic that you can use. Do you have products that are being returned to the kitchen? You know, you want to make sure that if you see that there's a lot of food coming back into the kitchen, that maybe that does indicate that your portions, you know, might be a little bit larger than they need to be. Does your kitchen staff always allow recipe guidelines and plating examples? So that's, again, very important, that as you're training and retraining your kitchen staff, is that they understand clearly, you know, what that plate needs to look like, or in this case, as we reopen in phase 1 with takeouts. You want to look to see if dishes are priced accurately. That's really important, and you really need to understand your supply costs that you are incurring. And really, you need to look at your food costs every week, right now, especially because, you know, we do tend to see prices raising, and they are coming up and down a little bit, but still, as long as we are having some shortages, you're going to see some rising prices at this point in time. You also need to look at what your competition charging for a similar dish. Make sure that you're staying in line with them. Do you have a feel for what you're actually comping customers on, or is your wait staff forgetting to charge for add-ons and substitutions? So, you know, do you have a staff that is putting 10 ketchup packs in a bag for one order of French fries, when maybe they're only supposed to put 3 packs per order of French fries? So these are all things that are going to, you know, determine what your food cost really is, that you want to actually pay attention to. So I wanted to just real quickly go over just a quick calculation for, you know, calculating your food cost. Again, like I said, you really need to be looking at this weekly to keep an eye on this. But you want to look at your inventory value at the beginning of the first week when you start really looking at this. Add to that your purchases made during that period, subtract out the inventory value at the end of that period, divide that by your food sales for the period, and that is going to give you your food cost percentage. So you want to look to see if that is in that window of from 28 to 35%. And again, anything that you can look at to lower that food supply cost, again, is going to help your profitability. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was turning the tables. You know, that's going to be really important to us in Virginia, particularly when you get to phase 2. We do know now that if you have outdoor seating, that, you know, you are going to be able to have people eating outdoors. And if you do have outdoor seating, you know, this is going to be important to you now. But during the dinner period, tables are usually going to flip 3 times. That's about every 1 to 1.5 hours for a family restaurant. So if you figure 2 hours probably for fine dining, and maybe an hour and 15 minutes for a casual venue. But if you're looking at this picture right here, what this shows is it really shows seating for 12 people. But if you think about the new guidelines, first of all, you can seat no more than 10 people together. So if you were able to seat 10 people together as a party, you're only able to seat 10. You're losing two table sittings, So over the course of an evening, that's going to be 6 people. If you have a party of 4 that comes in here, then are you able to move these tables around so that you can put 6 feet between a table of 4 and any other table? So the point is that this is at least, going to cut your capacity for a while by at least 50%. So I wanted to show you this, in helping you figure out what your revenue is going to look like. If you look at your time frame that you're going to serve, and you look at the number of parties served during that period, and you probably, from history, what that typically looks like. If you divide that by the number of tables occupied during that period, that's going to give you your turnover rate. So as you are making decisions about reopening and bringing on staff again, understanding that there's a lot more sanitation that's involved, I would take the turnover rate, I would multiply that per day by what my average sale is to kind of give me an idea what my projected revenue is per day, and compare that to the expenses that you're going to have. I think that's really important going forward, because we do know that your capacity is going to be reduced, and we do know that as we move into these next phases and you are having to, sanitize quite a bit indoors or outdoors if you've got seating, that's going to increase the responsibilities on your employees. That also means it's probably going to maybe take an additional employee to be doing that while someone else is actually working on servicing and preparation of food. So some table turn tricks that you might want to look at. And I said tick, 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 because it's, you really have to think about this as, time and turns in tables equates to money. So are your servers getting to each table within 1 minute after seating? Is staff having issues turning the tables during certain times? Are certain sections and servers turning more slowly than others? Are dishes being cleared as each guest finishes rather than all at one time? I really would suggest that during this time that, you communicate to your customers what things are going to be like, as they come in to dine with you, explaining that, we're working quickly to serve you, and in order to serve more individuals, we'd like you to be ready to order, and so that we can quickly serve you. I think you might want to consider, if you have these menus that you are discarding, or either you have a hostess who is posted outside in the waiting area where customers are coming in, that you allow that host or hostess to be your voice in letting them know what the expectation is when they come in to dine, and helping them to know if you have a special, or that you have a limited menu, so that they can start thinking about what they're going to order before they actually are seated at a table once you get to that point. Does your staff query whether guests are returning, saving time explaining the menu? That may be a little bit difficult to do, but again, I think if you utilize the host or the hostess, that you will be able to kind of communicate, what information they need before they sit down. Are servers making trade-offs with the check average? So again, it's very important to make sure that they are able to upsell on a check. You know, perhaps you want to think about offering them some sort of a option of a dessert to go. You know, again, shortening the amount of time that they are actually sitting at a table and allowing you to turn that over more quickly. Could you invite customers to move to another area? I think this is going to be difficult right now. It might work as we get into another phase, but everything that I'm seeing is that even with the states that have moved into a phase where they have people coming in and sitting inside, that the bar areas are closed. But moving forward, you know, this may be something that you want to think about. Just making sure that you are turning over those tables as quickly as possible. So this is just kind of an example that if you had 20 parties and 5 tables, you're getting 4 turns during a 4-hour period. You know, that's a good number of turnovers. Again, if you look at your average check per person, that's going to really give you an idea of what your projected revenues are going to be per day, you know, and helping you really figure out, for you to be able to be profitable per day, you know, what does your labor costs need to be? What are your food costs? And helping you determine what the direction is for you. So I wanted to offer, before Mandy gets started, again, your Sbdc or your small business development centers are at Virginia Highlands Community College, Southwest Virginia Community College, Galax at the Blue Ridge Crossroads Center, and at Mountain Empire Community College in Southwest Virginia. We are located throughout the state of Virginia. So if you all are in need of finding an Sbdc office, I would ask you to Google Virginia Sbdc, and you can find an SBD center in your area. I have listed a direct number in Southwest Virginia. Also, we are partnering with Virginia Community Capital. They are in all the territories as well, and they are happy to be of assistance to you also. So I've included this phone number. I'm going to stop sharing and then allow Mandy Archer to share some additional resources.
All right, sorry. You know, you think you have it ready to go and it doesn't do what you want it to do right at that moment. So of course, I know that we are kind of at our time of an hour, so I want to be quick so that we can answer questions for you all. Again, Chris had mentioned it, and one of the things that we really want to let you guys know about is the Virginia Sbdc Business Recovery information. It's the Business Recovery Resource Center. Basically, as you know, as businesses begin to look at this reopening and planning for transition of what this new normal is going to look like, there are lots of factors that need to be considered, and that decision needs to be made. Honestly, just because you're allowed to open during phase 1 doesn't mean maybe you have to or you should because of all of these factors. And that could be true for some of the other phases. And so what the Virginia Sbdc team and Tracy and Chris have both been very vital in making this happen is they've created a very robust website. It has detailed guidance covering a broad range of critical considerations, and it's compiling all the best available information for not only the food industry, but many other business sectors. And so it actually includes a lot of this information that Stephen and Sandy and Chris went over in more detail. And so really quick, I just want to click on it, and I don't know, does that actually show you guys pulling up when I do that? No, it does not. Okay. So when you go to that, and I'm actually going to go to that site really quick and show it to you, still learning some of these tricks of Zoom. Now, can you see that site? Okay, so you'll notice Recovery Resource Center. Cindy talked about being able to find your local office. You can click on that link. It'll take you to a place. You can actually put in this search box what type of information you're seeking, and it would take a look at it. But there's also lots of checklists, and really there's a review. And what we're looking at doing is trying to help you all to, review your current situation, get reopened, and then also recover. What does your future look like? And so there's assessments, reopening plans, and marketing, record keeping, technology. There's also guidance for the very specific resources, which is what some of our partners, of course, went over. Again, you'll see restaurants, Virginia ABC right here at the top. And this continues to be updated because, of course, all that information is going to be different for different industries. And also, just for your information, there's also still this COVID-19 resource page from the Virginia Sbdc site. This is where you can find lots of webinar information, all the loan things from the CARES Act, the EIDL, the PPP, and again, like I said, webinars and business information. So again, if I just go back to this sheet that we will also present to you whenever we send out these slides and such, is a few of these are, the favorite ones that for me that I've taken a look at, that I've referred a lot of clients to. The guidelines that Stephen went over under the Virginia Forward guidelines, those can be found on virginia.gov under their coronavirus page. National Restaurant Association has a reopening guidance document. I think Sandy actually reviewed some of those. Restaurant owner also has some trainings available that are free webinars and trainings in addition to ServSafe. SafeServe, sorry, I always get it mixed up. And then, of course, I think that Sandy was sharing a lot about this U.S. Food and Drug Administration, best practices for reopening. So again, this information will be shared to you. I wanted to just touch base on it very quickly, that Business Resource Center is going to be a top-notch place for you all to find information, not only about the restaurant and food industry, but about other business sectors. So we encourage you to point other individuals to that site as well through this process. So that was real quick, sweet, short to the point. Margie, Cindy, I'll turn it back over and let you guys address some of these questions we have.
Thanks, Mandy. We are running a little over, so we'll look at any of the questions that might be out there. Cindy, are you seeing any?
I will ask a couple of questions, some I posted. I think I've tried to answer questions that have popped up. So if you all have additional questions, please type those in the chat box. Stephen, the question for you is, what about bathrooms? I know that quarters are often close, and do you need to limit people in the bathrooms once that, we get into the phase where people are actually coming in, customers, and using restrooms? And also, you mentioned something about divisions between people or groups. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of going back to the restrooms, Sandy touched base with making sure you're using appropriate disinfectants. So I would make sure that restrooms, if open, are cleaned and disinfected frequently. And again, going back to the frequently touched surfaces. As far as limiting the number of people in the restroom, I guess staff should be kind of aware of how many people are actually in the building. So again, my understanding is currently no more than 10 in the building at a time, excluding the outdoor dining if patrons are seated outside. Kind of going back to the partition, so I think what this is kind of dealing with is if we've got face-to-face contact with customers and staff, they're just looking at putting up some sort of plexiglass barrier, a sneeze guard, if you will, to try to break that contact between staff and guests.
Okay.
I hope I answered that.
Okay.
Cool.
And while you're talking, I'm going to ask you one more thing too. You mentioned, or Sandy mentioned, I guess, providing sanitizers, hand sanitizers. So I was just thinking that since common touch items are not allowed right now, would you recommend to people that if they're using the bathroom soaps or sanitizers in the bathrooms, that those should be in dispensers?
Yeah, I think that's fine. If possible, the no touch are preferred. But if you do have to manually touch any sort of dispenser, that's a frequently touched surface. So hopefully if you're washing your hands, you dispense the soap, wash your hands. I would absolutely use paper towels or something. If you're operating manual faucets, using the paper towels to grab the doorknob on the way out. Push with your elbow if possible.
Okay. And I know that someone had asked a question and wanted to know where they might find hand sanitizers. They said that it seemed like the larger bottles were being reserved for healthcare. This question came up actually on another call, and I would tell you that some of your businesses that are that work with customized type products are able to get some individual sizes or smaller sizes. In Southwest Virginia, I know that there's a company, the name of that company is Jerry B. Peters Sales, that they have had access to customized types of hand sanitizers and other PPE. But if you're in another area, you know, you may want to look at similar type businesses that are in the business of doing like marketing or advertising products, that they seem to have some access to smaller sizes. I also would tell you that you should check with your food service providers because they may have access to hand sanitizers as well at this point. Stephen, another question was, and Sandy too, are restaurants being required to use disposable utensils during phase one?
I've not seen anything in any of the guidance documents restricting cleaning and sanitizing, so I'm just going to say no. If a facility chooses to use single service, I think that's okay and totally their call, but I'm not seeing anything that prohibits silverware.
Okay. Now, this person has several different questions, so I'm going to ask these once at a time, or one at a time. She says on gloves, can we ask dine-in patrons to wear gloves if provided?
I would totally leave that up to the facility. And I apologize, I can't remember the name, but somebody was discussing as patrons were coming into the facility, the hostess or staff members kind of discussing what they've got implemented. I think the facility, if they so choose, could ask. There's no requirement, so to speak, that I can speak of.
Okay. And on menus, she asked, can we use plastic type menus that can be sanitized, or can we only use disposable menus?
Yeah, going back to the Safer at Home phase one, the mandatory requirement, it does specify use of single-use disposable menus, e.g. paper, and discard after each customer. Reusable menus are not permitted in phase one.
Okay, and she also had a question on dine-in patrons. She said she was confused on whether it was outside only or inside now. And I can answer that at this point with Virginia, phase 1 is allowing patrons to dine on premises only if you have outdoor seating. She also said if we are inside, is the limit 10 people together or per building? And so Karen, right now my understanding on this is that if you are seating a party together, it can be no more than 10 people sitting together as a unit. And again, you cannot seat anyone inside yet in Virginia's phase 1. You would have to seat them outside in a seating area. So you would be able to seat 10 people together, but then you would have to spread them out at least six feet apart from the next closest table, if that makes sense. Stephen, anything else on that?
No, as you were saying, that sounds exactly right, and to my understanding. So if, depending on your outdoor seating, again, we'll have to maintain the 6-foot distancing between tables. If you've got a party that's coming in, again, I would try to get them to call ahead of time if possible. If you've got any sort of social media advertisement, you could kind of say, hey, you know, if you've got a large party, please call to verify we can accommodate, to hopefully limit any on-site issues.
And I think that the other thing that I read last night said that even outdoor seating is only allowed to be at 50% of that capacity. So if your outdoor seating accommodates 25, you know, then what you're able to seat right now has to be only 50% of that, you know, at a time. There is a question about if we are seating outdoor customers, are they allowed to come inside to use the restroom?
Yeah, I know it was one of the things I was looking through this morning. I didn't see anything specific to restroom use. I would say they could use the restrooms, and that may be something I need to dive a little deeper into and get back in touch with everybody.
And the second part of that question was if they are able to come in and use restrooms, did someone need to monitor the number of people entering and exiting? And we kind of covered that a little bit earlier. That was a question I had as well. So I think that, I don't know that I've read anything specifically on that, but I certainly think that that might be something that, you know, you might want to put signage up. If you only have 2 bathroom stalls in a bathroom, perhaps you put signage up that only allows 1 individual at a time.
Yeah, and I'll kind of chime in here too, just kind of going again through these mandatory requirements. A reference to restrooms in it is perform thorough cleaning and disinfection of frequently contacted surfaces, including, go through a few lists, tabletops, bathroom surfaces, and other common touch areas every 60 minutes during operation. So just kind of reading the wordage here, I'm assuming restrooms would be open and available.
Okay. And the other question is, what is the liability to a restaurant or retail facility if it is tracked back to find that a person caught COVID at their particular establishment?
That is a very good question, and I do not have the answer. I honestly have no idea. I know that they would, the nursing and other staff would potentially be doing the tracebacks, EPI. As far as any fines or anything of that nature, I have no idea.
think a lot of people have a lot of questions that we don't have answers to yet. And I would add that, you know, as I have talked to different restaurant owners, you know, they really started considering whether it makes sense for them to open during these early phases. And I think Mandy touched on that. You know, just because you can open doesn't mean you have to. And I think as far as the small business development centers go, you know, we are more interested in seeing the longevity of your business than seeing who can open the quickest. So that's why we've really wanted to encourage you all to look at these resources. Reach out to us. We're happy to help you in any way and try to help you make the decisions that are the best financial decisions for your business.
Cindy, I'd probably add on just about that insurance. One of the things that I've discussed with clients is go ahead and check with your insurance agent just to see if there is any type of coverage on your policy that covers that, you know, in case there is some type of liability on you. It's probably not likely. However, it doesn't hurt to check with that insurance agent. The other thing too is, you know, that's a lot of the reason we did this, and we're providing every resource we can, is because, you know, again, just do your due diligence. Make sure that you're following these safety guidelines that have been explained out by both Sandy and Stephen to for not only your patrons' safety, but your employees' safety as well. And so keep all of those things in mind when you're making your decisions to open and putting your policies into place.
Very
Yeah,
good.
and I'll just add too, as far as the health department, any restaurant operators, please do not hesitate to reach out to your local health department. They will be more than happy to discuss any concerns you may have.
Stephen, one other question that I've heard from some local business owners is, you know, what during this period of time right now is the health department focusing on in terms of inspections?
Yeah, typically, of course, we're trying to maintain our social distancing as well. We are trying to call and reach out through email, phone, social media, any way to kind of get in contact with operators and just kind of discuss what their COVID-19 responses are, review any information. Somebody was talking about the sanitizer earlier, so part of my conversation with my operators are just making sure that we do have enough cleaning and disinfecting chemicals available. You know, if you run out of those and the supply chain, you can't get them, then you can effectively clean, sanitize, disinfect. So that's probably going to inhibit your ability to operate at that time. If we get a complaint, we are making on-site visits. They've kind of put out some guidance for us, again, in an attempt to maintain social distancing. We are, if we do determine a site visit is necessary, sorry, I can't talk today, we self-assess our temperature daily, and we'll self-assess our symptoms. And we don't want to show up ourselves being sick to a facility. So we're trying to take every precaution that we can take. In certain circumstances, we would have to make a site visit though.
And I would also, Susan Henson asked a question. She said, it sounds like careful documentation of all the procedures you're doing to keep people safe could be helpful if any kind of liability accusations occur. Records, times, and initials of staff who've been doing the procedures. I think that's a very important point. I participated in a webinar series in Tennessee week before last. As you know, Tennessee's ahead of us in reopening, and their phase one has looked different from what Virginia's phase one looks like. And so they really have done a lot more with documentation. They are keeping lists which notes, what times that they've been assessing their employees. They're taking temperatures of their employees when they come on shift. They are doing assessments of customers as they come in. They talked about scanning temperatures of customers as they come in, really, and of course, Sandy talked about the signage, as did Stephen, just letting customers know that if for any reason, based on your assessment of the customers, or if it's temperatures or that type of thing, you're monitoring, that for any reason you feel like that there could be a possibility that they've been exposed, that you would ask them to please leave the location, and that you would not be able to serve them. So that's, I think, an important consideration. I think you are right. I think you do need to make sure that you have some documentation on your sanitization and those types of things, and kind of what your procedures are. I also listed the webinar series link that we are participating again with Virginia Capital on Thursday at noon. So that is listed in the chat bar. I would highly encourage you to sign up for this webinar. This week we will have a CPA that will be participating, and he will be talking about the types of documentation and record keeping that you should be making sure that you have in order to comply with the Payroll Protection Program guidelines for loan forgiveness. And we will also have an insurance agent that will be participating, who will be talking about some insurance issues regarding COVID-19. Those are continuing. This would be our second Thursday series, so there will be 2 more after this week. So thank you very much for attending. I'm looking, I don't see any other questions, but certainly feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions. This is being recorded today, and it will be posted on the Virginia Small Business Development Center website. Thank you very much, and have a great day.